My best advice to earliest stage founders is just make money. Like, I don't
Mhm.
care about your deck. I don't care about, I care about how eloquently you can talk about your problem, but can you bring dollars in the door?
CEOs spend their days building their businesses, and strategic questions often get pushed to the nights and weekends when they finally have time and space to think about the bigger picture. I call that CEO pajama time. I'm Sari Kakenoff, the CEO of AITSA, where I work alongside health tech leaders at exactly those moments. Come behind the scenes with me to learn from successful CEOs about the critical decisions and inflection points that shape their companies. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CEO Pajama Time podcast. Today, I'm joined by Tara Raffi, the CEO and founder of Almond OB-GYN. Tara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I didn't wear my pajamas, though. I hope that's okay.
You know, we always have that debate, and I kind of want to make people wear pajamas, but I don't want to wear pajamas, so then I feel like it's unfair. And so I don't, but you'll get a nice cozy sweatshirt as a thank you gift. So that'll be
Aw,
pajama-esque.
there you go.
Um So take us to the beginning. Take us to the way back. What made you start Almond? What was it? What is it? Help us understand the story.
Almond is functional OB-GYN care. Our philosophy is that women should be living more healthy years. And we have a chronic disease crisis in this country, and it impacts women disproportionately for a variety of reasons. And we believe very deeply that our lifestyle impacts our health, and that conventional medicine really overlooks this. And so much of the solution to our health problems can be found by addressing the core facets of our lifestyle, like sleep, stress, diet, exercise, community, metabolism, gut, and pelvic and vaginal health. So that's what we do. Where this all started, actually, so my first job out of college was as a consultant at McKinsey and Company. And what happened that gave birth to Almond is I was having recurrent UTIs. And for anybody who's had UTIs, they know it is so painful. And I would go to these doctors. I saw maybe 7 OB-GYNs, and they told me the same thing. Take this antibiotic. No, don't be afraid of taking too many antibiotics. No, there's nothing else to do. And it was a really deeply dissatisfying experience. And at the same time, I happened to have a project in a big hospital system. And it just what really struck me was that I was working 18 hours a day, helping this hospital system save $100 million a year in supply chain costs. And I noticed that of all the teams that we had at that hospital, none of them were working on quality of outcomes. It's just one of those moments, like it strikes you like a lightning. Like, how is that possible? I've seen 7 gynecologists who cannot explain this problem, and this affects 5% of the population every year, or 20% of the population, depending on how you look at UTIs, and we're not working on solving this problem. I knew that we, especially for women, needed to work on creating a model that works better, that solves our needs better. So that was like the lightning strike moment. Our mission was simple. Let's do something like, One Medical, but for the $200 billion OB-GYN market in the United States.
And so when you started, it was really an in-person model, right? Or was it in-person and virtual? Can you explain the model in the beginning?
It was both to start. The grand vision was deliver a model of care that just feels so obviously necessary to me
Mm-hmm.
as a woman, which is in-depth, high service care. We wanted to be the place that didn't just treat a yeast infection with medication, but actually could collect the right information, have the right experience with the patient so that you could uncover the root cause and treat the root cause. And in order to do that, we believed that we needed both in-person and telehealth care. And more importantly, on like a meta level, we wanted to create a model that ultimately the big health systems would want to and be able to replicate. Like that
Mm-hmm.
was one of the driving forces behind us choosing in-person care delivery at the beginning. We wanted to like make the big hospital systems jealous, so to speak. Like we
Yeah.
wanted to create something that was like taking their patients so they would have to also adapt to this model of care. Right when we started, we applied to get insurance contracts with the 5 largest payers in California. People would be like, "Oh, how did you do that? How did you get the contract so fast?" Like, "Oh, when we had the idea, we just applied." I mean, it's hard. It takes you a year to actually get the contracts, but you can just apply and you get their, like, shit wreck sub-Medicare rates.
So essentially, like thinking of like almost a mashup between functional medicine, traditional OB-GYN care, and traditional primary care. Is that but a better experience on top of it all?
That's exactly right.
So tell me, like, what were some of the early decisions that were really difficult? Like, it sounds like you had a clear vision of it's got to be like normal care. But what were some of the sort of more difficult early decisions, whether it's your own business model or how you set things up?
One of the really difficult decisions was how and when to hire care providers. We had talked to enough founders in our space that we knew that this is the cost. Like provider salaries and marketing, these are the 2 big cost buckets in our
Hmm.
business. And, we raised a tiny pre-seed. We raised $230,000. So we really needed to think about how do we hire care providers and make it economically work. We were very scrappy. We found people who were willing to get paid on a very part-time basis. And we cobbled together a really good clinical team in that way. And then we did YC and then we raised a seed round with several just extraordinary investors. We raised this great round. Then we kind of sprung for bringing on a provider full time, and that gave us a good mix of scale, but cost savings.
How long did it take you to get from the beginning to that point?
So long. Oh my god. Like, it's funny, I remember at YC we had I don't know, it was one of the founders of this, like, huge crypto company, and he was talking to all the founders, incredible speaker, incredible guy, and he was like, "Man, like, guys, don't be dissuaded by the no's. Investors are gonna tell you no." I had so many no's. I had, like, 60 no's before I got a yes. Like, I had 180 no's before I got a yes. I could get in front of the VCs, like, all my male friends from college are, like, founders, they gave me warm intros to all the best VCs. I had the meeting. We even got close several times with really great funds, but we couldn't get there. I probably had my first VC call in, like, November of 2020, and
Mm.
we got into YC in spring of 2022. It was, like, a year and a half later.
And so, why do you think that was? Like, what made it so difficult?
I think it's harder to raise money as a female founder. I think the way that I don't blame any of the VCs. I think they're all really good, smart people. Um, I think the human mind works, especially the VC world, just it's you need to build an intuitive sense. And people who look and operate too differently from you, it's really hard to hone that intuition. And ultimately, the big thing got where we got momentum is I was able to break through the gender barrier in a different way. We had multiple extraordinary angel investors who came on early. Caesar Javaharian, who is the founder at Carbon Health, Steve
Hmm.
Edelman, the founder at Modern Animal, Shardul Shah, who is a partner at Index Ventures. These were a few of our early believers, and they had something that they really understood about our market, and even the first 2, they ran similar businesses in different verticals, and to them, it was, like, obvious, like, "Yeah, this is missing in women's health." I think that's my advice to female founders. The VC who you don't have an emotional connection to, like, who doesn't have an emotional connection to your business, is just gonna be so much harder to raise money from.
And tell me then, why were you so intent on this being an OB-GYN business? Why could this not have been just a primary care functional medicine business?
Because there are over 1 billion women in the world who need better healthcare. The size of the problem is so big, and because there are fewer female entrepreneurs and female investors who who have the right mix of insight and skills and runway to work on this problem, we have a massive mountain and a meager dribbling of tools to work on breaking down that mountain. So I cannot think of something more urgent, more important to work on.
So during that time, it's about a year and a half, you have fractional doctors. You said doctors and marketing. So tell me, how is the business going? Like, were you getting traction? Were you seeing interest from consumers or patients?
So at that time, we had a amazing OB-GYN who had been my OB-GYN, who kinda let us use her office space and, like, saw our patients early on. In the early days, we did a little bit of marketing, just, like, social media marketing, and people found us, and they came in, and it was enough we had enough kind of speed of revenue. I mean, these are really small numbers in the early days, but it made YC pay attention. I think, like, in the really early days, what YC and those really early stage investors are looking for is just like, can you move? Can you do stuff?
Yeah.
Can you bring in dollars? Like my best advice to like the earliest stage founders is just make money. Like I don't
Mhm.
care about your deck. I don't care about. I mean, I care about how eloquently you can talk about your problem, but can you bring dollars in the door? And so we proved that early and got to like 300K run rate within several months. And so that was good traction.
And this was all through insurance, or in the beginning it was cash pay?
From the very beginning, it was always hybrid. It was always insurance plus a yearly membership. We
Uh-huh.
started the yearly membership quite low at $150. Eventually, it got up to $450. And um, that was at that point, at the $450 mark, we reached profitability on just like a 50% full clinic. So that
Mhm.
pricing mix was actually a sustainable, good pricing mix well for our market.
Interesting. And was profitability your goal? I mean, that's such a strange word to hear from a startup founder at this stage, at that stage. So I'm curious, like, was that a goal that you had, or it just kind of happened?
Yeah, I think in clinical operations, just a ruthless focus on profitability has to be your goal. It has to. This is, in a way, a very old-fashioned industry. I guess bigger picture, I should say, I think brick and mortar has a lot of challenges, and it's not a market that I would build in right now, and that's why we shut down that Almond clinic, unfortunately, which was a very excruciating decision to make, but the dynamics of the healthcare market are toxic to businesses and to patients and to
Mhm.
doctors. It's really toxic to everybody except for maybe insurance companies right now. We need a radical reformation of our healthcare market in several ways, and that's coming. Um, but if you are going to operate in that market, you need a couple things to really work for you. You need to be a ruthlessly efficient operator. You need to be obsessed with profitability. And I think
Mhm.
that was one of the things that let us succeed to the extent that we did. My dad is an immigrant from Iran. He has built several of his own entrepreneurial endeavors, and what I've understood from watching him is those little things matter. They
Mhm.
add up. You need both a strategic vision, but you need to watch the dollar. We did that from early on.
So tell me, you mentioned that you shut down the clinic part, which obviously was the core part of the business model from the beginning. So tell me, like, what led up to that, and what was the decision process around that?
Ultimately, what we realized is that brick and mortar doesn't scale efficiently enough. I had heard that VCs do not like to invest in brick and mortar. What we always heard is, "Oh, brick and mortar is so expensive," and we would get these questions in our pitch like, "Well, how much was your how much is your build out? How much are you spending a month?" And I would and because I was so focused on those arguments, I like blew those out of the park. I was like, okay, we did our build out for $75,000. And people would be like blown away. What? We're used to $500,000 build outs. Okay, I'm crushing this because I'm just doing this so
Yeah.
efficiently. That was a mistaken, like a red herring.
Mm.
The true problem with brick and mortar is that the marketing dollars are inefficient because you are focused on marketing to a specific geo, and
Yeah.
it is so much more efficient to market to the country or to the world. And that was a problem number 1. Problem number 2, which ended up being the even bigger deal, was that the more efficient way to grow our type of business is through partnerships. Employer partnerships, payer partnerships, corporate partnerships with other similar wellness brands. And if you are only located in Los Angeles, California, in the Melrose Fairfax district, that really limits the type and number of partnerships that you can do. It inhibited us from signing employers. There's so many cool things that we could have done really early on if we had not been geo constrained. Once we released that constraint, we made a strategic shift in early 2025 to offer a telehealth only subscription. And once we did that, the horizons opened up in this beautiful way. We had incredible partnerships that were live and in the work. We partnered with Evie. Evie is an incredible vaginal microbiome test that you should check out if you're a woman and you don't already know about it. Give you such a depth of information on your vaginal microbiome. It really helps people who are struggling with recurrent infections and a whole host of things. We could be the clinician that helped patients on their platform. We had a partnership in the works with Bobby. We had just there were so many cool things that we could do, but it was just a little too late. And we needed to fundraise for our next round. And we were caught in this position that was honestly a little bit awkward in that we knew that we needed to make a pivot, but we hadn't proved it out yet.
Mhm.
And so it just became simpler to close down the clinic and squarely focus our attention on what's next.
So if you look back on that, what would you have done differently? I mean, obviously didn't quite turn out with the model that you originally wanted. So what would you have done differently at that along that journey and when?
On the brick and mortar piece, Seth, it's easy to say, okay, well, it would have been good to do telehealth earlier. One of our investors, we had incredible advisors and investors. Britt Marin from Buffalo Ventures, who is just super smart. She has incredible insight and taste and kind of like instinct for the market. She had that insight probably a year at least before we made the switch. She was like, do telehealth. And I was like, no, Britt, like you're just an investor, trying I need to like stay true to my mission. And that's true as a founder. There's so many different people with different ideas, and hindsight's 2020. You can always say, okay, well, this person had this idea, we should listen to them. And that's not necessarily true. The only thing I can say that I could have done differently is just to spend more time learning in parallel with building.
Mm,
Yes, as a founder, you need to be focused on building, but it is also our job to learn and
yeah.
to really make it a priority to block out time. I read somebody interviewed Mark Andreessen and shared his like schedule. What most struck me is that Mark Andreessen blocks out time for learning. Like
Mhm.
it is literally his job. And I think that is true for founders. Moving forward next time around as we rebuild, there's going to be holds on my calendar for learning, for meeting with other founders, for going, I didn't go to conferences really. I was just like so focused. I'm gonna go to more conferences moving forward. And then maybe you hone your gut that way. So that's number 1. I think number 2, in retrospect, one thing I would do differently is I would pick a more specific patient journey. We really attacked obstetrics and gynecology broadly, which I believe is important, but we didn't have a specific enough differentiator. I think patients who came to us loved us. We had a 97 NPS. They were obsessed. Patients would leave in tears out of like joy at the experience that they were having. But it was not obvious that you should share almond with your friends, really, because your
Mm,
friend comes to you with a very specific problem. Oh, I'm having recurrent pain, and that might be really different than your problem, which is recurrent yeast infections. And you might not think that, okay, this root
yeah.
cause methodology is going to help that person the way that it helped me. I mean, now people are talking more about root cause and functional than they were a few years ago. But yeah, I think that wisdom to focus and do one thing really, really well first is an important growth tool.
Yeah. It's interesting what you said though about listening to advisors because at the same time, as a founder, you have to hone your skill to ignore all the no's, right? Like you went through all those 180 no's. You had to ignore those people and say, no, they don't know what they're saying. So then it's also hard to then listen. Like you're almost like saying it's almost like two things you have to balance of like how do you hear the advice but also filter it through and choose what you're gonna keep. It's a tricky balance.
Yeah, exactly. No, it is, right. We were just, it felt like getting started on marketing brick and mortar and to
Uh-huh.
pivot to telehealth was, I mean, I was not I didn't even consider it for more than 1 minute. And it's right, your filter is a critical skill, but it's not about, like, having smaller holes in your filter. It's about building a better filter. And the
Uh-huh.
only way to build a better filter is is to just be a student and ask
Uh-huh.
questions obsessively and, like, really, like, to have a good mental model of where are your blind spot in the market, understand where's your weak spot in understanding in the market,
Mhm.
and as CEO especially, or as head of product or as CTO, depending on what kind of business it is, you have to have awareness about your blind spots, and I think I had a blind spot around what were the go-to-market mechanisms that were working at that moment in time. I knew that there were several examples of companies that had go-to-market strategies that looked like ours and that were so far successful, but those companies hadn't reached exits. My mental model is incomplete, and I need to always be updating it.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that you say that because one thing I think that might be a challenge is that because a lot of these companies raise a lot of venture funding, it may not be so easy to tell what's working and what's not working, right? Because you're seeing growth, but you don't know if that's fueled by the money they've raised or by their success or both. But, if you were looking at carbon in that time period and saying, oh, they're doing great, I mean, you weren't seeing the books underneath, you were seeing their growth, right? And so that
Right.
is also a tricky thing. It's almost like we need to get under the hood of the dynamics of what's really happening to be able to make those decisions.
Exactly. And that's all about sitting down with smart people who are building, who you trust, who you vibe with, who you believe are going to tell you the truth, and ask them hard questions. You think, to your point, that like the relevant facts are surfaced to us, that they're surfaced by the media, that they're surfaced in podcasts, they're surfaced,
Hmm.
they're not.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, what other lessons would you impart on your either earlier self or on another founder starting off? Like, obviously, it sounds like make time for learning, talk to lots of people. What else would you think is a really critical piece?
Everything is about your team. We know the saying that an A team with a B idea will do better than a B team with an A idea.
Hmm.
And it's true every time, in every way. The successes that we had were thanks to the vision and the competence of several talented people on our leadership team. Those extraordinary people, I wake up every single morning and I'm so thankful that they exist because they've just changed my life. They've changed the trajectory of the company. They're also just like fun to work with because these people just exude life force and energy, and you need that to keep going when every single week there is just some huge slap in the face one way or
Hmm.
another. Um, and every single time I've had a bad feeling about somebody, within like the first month of working with them, every single time that feeling has been right. There's never been
Hmm.
an exception. I think, especially as a founder, there's something that is like delusionally optimistic about
Hmm.
your worldview, and that's necessary in a lot of ways. But I have learned that the times when I let myself be delusionally optimistic about a person, like this person, they have challenges in certain ways, but their strengths in certain ways, and I just believe like this person's gonna overcome this hurdle and become like 50% better. That has never happened. And what happens in me is that because I set that expectation for them and then they can't meet that, then I become resentful and it wastes
Mm.
my energy. So a big lesson I've learned is, you know, let people be who they are. Maybe they're going to become 10% better, 10% different, but not 50%.
I love that. Let them be who they are. Wow. That's such a great way to put it. What are the practical ways you would do this? Like, is there a gut feeling you need to listen to more? Is there a more rigorous interview process? Like, what would help you think, in the future filter that better?
I mean, interviews are good for weeding out obvious non fits,
Hmm.
but But past a certain point, you have to work with somebody. I mean, first of all, you have to run very good references, very honest references. The people who are doing the reference know. You have to find a way to really help impart on people that it is critical that they give you an honest reference and that it is okay to share developmental feedback. And then the only other way is you have to work on a project together. And whenever possible, I set up that project as part of the interview process itself. So I will craft some questions, some side quest, some hopefully a useful piece of work that I am depending on, and see what quality work that person puts out. And that has worked almost in every case.
Is it like a skill set thing, or is it more of a cultural values fit type of thing that has been off in the past?
It can really be either. And I'd say those are the two big categories. Um, there are certainly
Mhm.
times where there's been an extraordinary values fit, like a great person who understands what it means to work at a startup and give it your all and just like be a good team player and be an owner, and they don't have the skills. And for me, that's actually that's the hardest situation, like to part ways
Mhm.
because like somebody who just like wants to be your teammate and like stick it through to the end, like, that's just
Mhm.
the best feeling, that kind of partnership, and that's so valuable. And then there are cases where somebody has the skills, but does not understand what it really takes to be part of a team. It's part of a startup team. I mean, it's a very specific type of thing. A lot
Mhm.
of people, it's like sexy to be part of a startup. You want to. Some people want to be there, but, their risk appetite and their traumas or whatever, like, don't interact
Yeah.
well with a startup.
So what about myth busting? Anything people told you as a CEO across the journey where you're like, totally not bad.
I think there are a couple. I think that there's a lot in the media that makes founding a company really glorious, and it is. It's an
Mhm.
incredible honor to get to be trusted by a set of people, with their time, with their capital, the rooms that you get access to, just like the people who are building things that you get to talk to and meet. I mean, that's for me maybe as second best to helping women improve their health. But the quality of this of the as YC would call it, as a founder, you need to learn to contend with the weekly slap in the face. I think that's a really good metaphor. The
Ouch. Yeah.
sting of the slap in the face, it hurts. It's like it's really hard. And I think that's a good metaphor because the difficulty is it's a very specific type of difficulty. It's like personal, it's surprising. There's like always a surprising problem. I think you really need to understand that, the, like, really unsexy part of it, and build a muscle to just quiet your body's reaction to the sting of
Mhm.
that slap. So that's number 1. I think number 2, and this is, maybe unpopular, but I think there's also this, like, founders never quit, they build at all costs type of mythology, which is certainly true and certainly valuable. Like, there are the I think the type of personality who is attracted to this kind of work certainly just naturally has that kind of quality, but you need to also be very careful that you are not just performing that continue at all costs, and you need to keep an eye on what's really in your best interest as a founder because, how many more years do you have to work? How many more
Mhm.
years like, your time has an opportunity cost, and the time that you're spending toiling on a certain problem and maybe you're stuck, that time might be better spent somewhere else. And
Mhm.
I think the reason why I think about this as a myth is that I think for investors, there are good investors who will tell you when to take a step back, which ours did, and I'm so fortunate. 4 of our really close advisors who knew how to guide me on when to take a step back. And I think there are a
Mhm.
lot of VCs who won't tell you that because it's in their best interest that you die trying. So think
Right.
about that too.
Mhm. Yeah. So then how like maybe on a very practical sense, like it's hard, you're getting the slaps, you're all of that. Is there like any tips and tricks in your day-to-day life to kind of keep things calm and centered and, give yourself the energy to keep on going?
I don't know, maybe this is, like, my Persian heritage and, like, I've studied a lot of Rumi, like a Persian poet and mystic. I think the antidote to most struggle and most conflict and most pain is being able to find the love in
Mhm.
whatever it is. The love of the person who is threatening to sue you, the love of your spouse when they are frustrated that you are spending another night working late, the love of yourself when you feel like you really messed up that meeting. Yeah, like you can meditate and exercise and like do those things, but like why are we even doing all of this? Like ultimately I think that we exist to like feel and spread love for other people.
Mhm.
And the more quickly you can reconnect to that in any situation that's difficult, like, I think you've just skipped a lot of steps, and everything else is a tool to be able to, like,
Mhm.
calm your nervous system enough that you can reconnect to that, because that's just the most natural thing that we do as humans.
Mhm. So what's ahead for you, for Almond?
I mean, we're fighting this, like, urgent battle to not let people get AI slop healthcare that is,
Mhm.
designed for men and not for women. That falls into the slop category if it's if it's advice that is not properly attuned to women's bodies. And so to that end, we are we're right now we're really focused on our data edge. We have an extraordinarily unique advantage in this market
Mhm.
in that we have one of the largest functional women's healthcare data sets, and we're actively purposing that to deliver better care. More to come on that. Um, and to anybody listening to this who loves that mission, reach out to me, Tara at almondobgyn.com, or get, an intro through somebody, because I get a lot of spam, so I might not see your email, but anybody who is an engineer or a marketer or a physician of any kind who wants to work in this space, or just wants to meet, come talk to me. I would love to meet you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tara, for sharing your journey. And it's been ups and downs. So it's really thoughtful of you to share that with some of the other listeners.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for doing this.